Hey there, Pisces. How you doing? So this is a forecast. It's a 2-week forecast from the full moon to the new moon. That's on the 9th of August. We've got the full moon in Aquarius. And then on the 23rd of August, we've got the new moon in Virgo. Now, this is quite an interesting time because this new moon in Virgo is the first of 2 new moons in Virgo. And the second one is a solar eclipse. So there is a very, very strong Virgo theme coming up. And of course, that's your 7th house. You know, the Virgo energy is all about partnerships for you. So there's a really sort of, how can I put it? There's a strong clearing energy arriving for you in the realm of relationships. Now, I've called this, you know, you were born for this rebirth, and that sounds quite dramatic for me. But here's why, I guess. I'm going to be showing you 3 key parts of this 2-week forecast, you know, from the unmasking energy of the full moon. In fact, I've kind of put it as revealed, refined, and then rebirth. So the full moon I really see as a time of revelation, where the masks that we might have been using all this time are revealing the mess that us humans have been living with. You know, so for instance, you know, often to hide our mess, we put a mask on. And, you know, this full moon is revealing all, you know, the cracks that show up at this time are really showing what you haven't attended to. And so after that, I really think in the post full moon period, we're coming up to a pressure to purify kind of energy. And that's with the refined, you know, refining everything, pulling back, making changes to shift. And, you know, I really think it's a big part of this 2-week process. And then as we're coming to the end, coming up to the time of the new moon in Virgo, this is the time for the rebirth. And so really what I'm saying here is honor the mess whilst not giving up the sacred. That to me is a really strong sentiment. But I've narrowed it down to 3 questions. They are quite big questions, but I'm going to be answering this in your forecast today. So the questions are: where has my mask been for survival, and what would I prefer to express in its place? What truth about myself or my life has become impossible to ignore, and what would shift it? And then finally, what small sacred act of cleansing and reordering could help me restore faith in myself? So yeah, I'm going to give that a go. It sounds good to me. You know, often when I do these, I also look at the moon phase we're in and every single different aspect that's going on in these 2 weeks. And, you know, I'm doing that in a separate video. So if you are looking for that kind of involvement, check out the details below. There's a link for the full astrology scoop for this period in time, so you can look at it that way. Anyway, I'm going to bring up 2 charts now. One of them's a full moon and the other one's the new moon. But just before I do that, I just want to say thank you to everybody that supports this channel, whether it's historically, whether it's right now, or via membership, because I've got 2 communities. Then, you know, thank you so much. You're making such a difference in my life and making it really possible for me to show up and do these forecasts. I really appreciate you. Thank you. So here they are. This is the full moon chart from a Piscean perspective. And you can see the full moon is showing up. It's kind of shining its reflected light in the 12th house. And the sun is in the 6th house. Now, these are sort of interesting houses to be talking about a rebirth from, because the 6th house I always think of as, you know, the nerve center of your life. You know, it's where everything, your whole story is constructed and it plays out. And so planets in this part of your chart really do create a buzz. You know, they're really helping you to create lots of context and meaning. And so we get caught in our stories. But with the moon in the 12th house, there's also this unraveling of your stories. You know, the 12th house is that soul place. That's a place of the imagination, the instinct, the intuition, the psyche, the unconscious mind. And so the moon, sort of illuminating this part of your chart, is really helping you to unravel some of these very solid patterns. Yeah, so there's this tension between sort of creating context about your life, creating a story, and then this sort of this unraveling force where it feels like, you know, these stories really aren't mine. You know, I'm living out somebody else's story. I'm living out a process. It's almost showing, you know, where your life is machine-like, you know, where it's so in its habit and its routine. And of course, Mercury has been going retrograde through your 6th house as well, getting you to really be curious about other ways of running your life, and also questioning different parts of your life. Now, if you are interested in Mercury, by the way, at the end of this video, I've lined it up. So if you want to go straight to watching a short 3 to 4 minute video about Mercury going direct on the 11th and his involvement with Pluto retrograde, this has been definitely one of the telltale signs of this Mercury retrograde, then just check it out at the end of this video. I'm not actually making it go live until the 11th, so you get a preview if you follow that link. But anyway, this has been definitely a place where you've been going through a lot of change and really questioning yourself. Now, when we move the moon around to the 7th house, which is where the new moon in Virgo is taking place, you should notice a few things. First of all, there's these green lines. Now, you don't normally see these on these charts. This is a very rare connection. This is known as a yod. They do spring up, and this is one of the most common types of yod, but for it to show up at the time of the new moon is quite unusual. So it's made by 2 quincunxes that you can see here, and then a sextile here. And so what's going on is Pluto in your 12th house is putting quite a lot of pressure on you, and Saturn and Neptune is putting quite a lot of pressure. And these 2 forces of pressure are creating this outward movement, pointing towards the new moon and everything that the new moon represents. Now, a yod is also known as a finger of fate, sometimes known as a finger of God. It's like God's voice or fate's voice talking to you. And wherever it points, it's showing where life wants you to pay attention. And so it's pointing to relationships. It's suggesting that in relationships, like if you don't have a relationship, maybe it's time to begin considering relationships again. Maybe if you're in a relationship, you might sort of wonder how you can improve it or renovate it or have a restart with your relationship. So these are the 2 pressures. So Pluto in your 12th house is Pluto's interesting because he is a planet of control, but he also brings up fear. And sometimes Pluto in the 12th house can bring up a lot of fears of the unknown. And in the 12th house, you know, it's the psyche, it's a very imaginative place. And so your mind can really get, it can really run wild if you're not careful with Pluto in there. So anywhere where you might feel vulnerable, that can go completely out of control. Pluto, however, if you're able to recognize that, Pluto could be quite transformative. You know, you could actually start to use the power of your mind to make real changes. Once you realize how strong your mind is, you could use meditation, NLP, hypnotherapy, and every other kind of subliminal art and technique to create really great change in your life. But there's a pressure coming from inside your mind, maybe a fear of things unraveling, a fear of and death as well, you know, like a fear of how you might die, or often with Pluto in here, there's very irrational things that come up. It can be quite surprising. And Saturn here and Neptune, you know, Saturn in the 2nd house is usually kind of pulling up his sleeves and rubbing his hands and saying, right, it's time to get your money sorted out. You know, he's really kind of forceful, you know, really saying, you know, it's time, you know, you have to take yourself very seriously. You have to do this. And, you know, he can be quite bossy, but he can also show you where you don't quite have the self-esteem to maybe get the job done. You know, I often find that Saturn and Neptune coming into the 2nd house shows where you might be feeling a bit frail in yourself. Maybe you don't have quite the confidence you thought you had. And of course, anywhere where you don't feel you're good enough or deserving enough, and you might have insecurities, it blocks the flow of your resources. So I think Saturn and Neptune here are quite likely to have created a bit of a resource drama and also a self-esteem drama. Now, that sounds like it could be quite negative, but in fact, it's this kind of pressure that usually evolves to help us realize that we can cope with it. Sometimes we have to be pushed a little bit to be able to come up with our really best ideas. I know that it wasn't until I've had some hardships and difficult moments in my life, that's when things really started to evolve quite quickly. So Saturn and Neptune here don't necessarily feel like a blessing, but they could really turn your money around. But it's suffice to say, there's possibly a fear of the unknown and a fear of not being good enough to be able to provide for yourself. And so it's interesting here that these two pressures are pushing you out towards an area of companionship. Maybe it feels safer when you're connected to somebody else. Maybe it feels safer when you can share some of the burden, when you can feel supported by somebody else, maybe financially, maybe not. However, I think I can only talk from my own experience here, because obviously I'm not you and I'm only me. But one thing I notice is it's much harder to fool myself. It's much harder to hold an insecurity for very long when you're in a close relationship, either with a best friend or a life partner or even children, because they call you out on it. So anywhere where you're alone and you've cultivated aloneness as a habit, and from a place of joy, because it's nice to be alone as well, you may well find that the aloneness has stopped you checking in on yourself. It's allowing these patterns to run wild. It's allowing you to go down these massive loops of despair or despondency or insecurity. It's allowing you to blow things up out of proportion. Whereas if you had very strong people around you, or allowed yourself to be spoken to quite intimately by children, a partner, a best friend, a parent, they might say, hang on a second, whoa, roll that back a little bit. Sounds like you just said something that didn't quite make sense. Hang on a second, let's examine this. So to me, it feels like one of the ways that life is trying to push you right now is to partner up, is to find a companion, to be able to talk about some of these things, to share some of the load. So you feel like you're not on your own, and you feel like you've got somebody's got your back, and that you don't have to do it all on your own. And so to me, whether you're already in a relationship or not, what I see arriving is a greater intimacy, a greater reordering of your relationship, so that you can support each other at a much greater degree. And maybe some of this sorting out is, if you're in a relationship where there's no support, maybe that's your cue to, and I'm not suggesting what you do or not, but one thing I do recognize is when we have one new moon and then a following new moon and or eclipse in the same sign, it's really giving you some strong advice. And this next new moon, if you're not feeling this change, this kind of purification of your relationships, this importance of your relationships, then this next new moon on the 23rd of September, it's in opposition to Saturn and it's in opposition to Neptune. It will absolutely be bringing up some much stronger issues. So to me, it feels like there is an invitation to you to consider which partners are supportive and how you can have a more intimate relationship. This can be friendship. This could even be feeling like you've got a therapist that you can talk to, or a coach. This could be any kind of relationship. Maybe there's somebody in town, like, I don't know. Years and years and years ago, I became really good friends with one of my neighbours who was an elderly man. He had no relatives. He was from Croatia, and we were in England. He wasn't able to go home because he'd absconded from, bless him, he'd absconded from national service, and so he was forever trapped in England. And he was aging, he was ill, and he became like my best friend for a while. I was with him, as he, got older and eventually passed away. Sometimes our friendships and our connections come from the strangest of places. But to me, there's a need for companionship. And maybe you can't stretch to a human. Maybe your companion is your dog or your cat, who become your, they're there. You can talk to them and they don't answer back, but they definitely will be guiding you to love yourself a lot more. So to me, there's a partnership. There is a need for partnership at some level, in a way that's comfortable for you. And, you know, if you can't do animals, you can't do plants, you can't do real life people, then how can you partner yourself? How can you talk to yourself and open up to yourself and maybe play two parts? You know, how can you do both the talking and opening up and also the listening, the deep listening and the empathy and the, well, you didn't stand a chance. Of course not. You know, come back in, like bring in that hug. So to me, there's a very deep transformation going on for you, that will help you to come out of any self-imposed isolation. And this is really important. Now, Uranus at home is also stressing this. Uranus is a very interesting planet at the moment because he is working very fast, creating a lot of transformation in these very private houses. So you've got Uranus, Mars and Pluto all working in these private parts of your chart to do with instinct, the past, triggers, old things happening, ancestral things happening, and it's moving and shifting. So there are a lot of feelings coming up. I'm quite sure about that. There's a lot coming up. And to me, it just feels like as you are moving forwards, there's a much stronger relationship possibility for you. Now, one of the things I really love about this time, and that would be the Jupiter and Venus conjunction, which is happening on the 12th. This is a brilliant, brilliant energy. I'm just going back to this chart and you can see it coming in at the start of the full moon in Aquarius. Venus is really close by, and, you know, they're both in a trine to the North Node. Remember, I mean, at the moment, you've got the North Node going through your first house and the South Node going through your seventh. This nodal pattern right now, which takes 18 months to go through, you're 6 months through it. These nodal patterns are, it's showing you that your relationship to self and coming to terms with partners, and developing these skills. To me, your life at the moment is orienting towards the relationship between you and other people and examining it. You know, if you're, you know, older than say 40, you might choose, or 50, you might choose to ask yourself what was going on about 19 years ago. That would have been the last time that these nodes were going through this position. So if you can remember that far back, you know, what were you learning about relationships? And what were you learning about yourself in relation to relationships? But anyway, the Jupiter and Venus in this fifth part of your chart are really opening up the potentials for new partners to come in. It's very pleasing. This is a place of openness. This is a place of joy and passion. And Venus and Jupiter coming together, you don't really get a stronger image of a potential new relationship than this, especially connected to the North Node. So yeah, I think this is a time to strengthen relationships. There's one more aspect I really want to talk about, and that would be the sun, not the sun coming into Virgo, but the sun in a trine to Chiron. This is happening on the 19th. It happens twice a year. And the sun is going to be here, if I'm right, yeah, it will be around about here. And he's going to be in a trine with Chiron in your second house. To me, what this is representing is this moment of, I think, remembrance of when you've been in your power and when you felt a great sense of self-esteem and when you feel like you've got it all working really well. To me, there is this remembrance of how you cope with life and how you have in the past many times been acing life, you know, like where life has felt really great and motivated. And so I think on the 19th, you might get some clues as to what really works for you, which you might have forgotten. And I think you can close the door on a couple of things that have been bothering you. You know, maybe you've not felt worthy enough, or, you know, maybe you've had some questions about, you know, your overall value, how other people value you. Whatever's coming up, the 19th is a day to close the door on it, and to think, yeah, I've done really well here. It's like you're giving yourself a pat on the back. So to me, there's some very, very strong things. And then, of course, we've got this new moon in Virgo, which is divine, divinely ordered, I would say, as well. So let's have a look at these questions. So where is my mask for survival? where's it been, and what would I prefer to express? So I really think the mask is coming in and breaking down around the time of the full moon in Aquarius. One of the things I actually think this mask is breaking down here in the 12th house. To me, as I look at this, where has your mask been playing out for survival? I think you pretending you can live a normal life, and that you really love the kind of usual flow of things. I think that has been a mask for survival, not declaring yourself to be a highly sensitive person, an HSP. I think hiding your sensitivity and hiding your psychic instincts, hiding sometimes your frailty as well and your vulnerability. I think all of that hidden stuff is part of your mask. And I think around the time of the full moon, it's cracking. It's breaking down. You recognize you can't keep putting on an act because it's not right. You can't really have a proper relationship with people if they believe you to be, like you can cope with all the slings and arrows and the ups and downs of life. But actually underneath, some of these things are quite crippling. They are quite demoralizing. Maybe you need a lot of time to be able to recover if you've been very busy. I know I do. I've got my moon in Pisces. I think, like if you've got a very sort of introverted way of doing things, it's sort of introverted and intuitive way of being, and you're all in your feeling energy, I think I really think it can be quite hard making your way in this world. And so I do think your mask is cracking in terms of what's normal, and you're allowing yourself to just be like, to own your sensitivity. And yeah, that could have a knock-on effect that could be slightly negative at first. But, what truth about myself or my life has become impossible to ignore, and what would shift it? Well, again, with the sun in this area and also Mercury retrograde, I think you'll be most likely reviewing your health. The health shows up here as well. I think the strain it puts on you to be functional, to appear like normal. Oh yes, I can do this. I think it puts a strain on you. I don't think you can ignore it anymore. Also, to me, it feels like to hold your home as you have has put you in some stress and strain, and it feels like there's a need for a new place to live. Maybe it's time to embrace a new location. But to me, there is a breaking up of the home. Now, that's not to say, your relationship is breaking up or anything like that. I'm not trying to scare you or anything. But to me, it feels like there's a need for a new inspiration at home. Whenever Uranus comes into this 4th house, and I remember it very well, it's showing that where you've been kind of stable and secure, there is something else coming in. There's something being expressed through you right now that is actually looking for some change. It's not looking for the normality. It's not looking for the stability. It's looking for a little bit of wriggle room. It's looking for a bit of inspiration, a bit more integrity. So maybe where you're living isn't quite right as well. So to me, it just feels like there are some subtle changes in how you want to declare yourself to be, and that will have a knock-on effect in terms of kind of moving you to a different location that suits you a bit more. Then what small sacred act of cleansing and reordering could help me restore my faith in myself? Well, I can think of something very powerful, and it's not come from me. I've picked this up over the years from other people and other healers, but calling yourself back. This is something that's going on with the North Node and the South Node across your seventh house and first house. This is all about the dynamics between you and other people. And of course, with this next new moon and then the following new moon in the 7th house, and it's an eclipse, to me, there's a very strong theme of balancing out your needs versus everyone else's. And so I think calling back your energy, being a sensitive person, go into a relaxed breathing state, find yourself in a calm situation where you can talk to yourself for a little bit or visualize things, in the safety of your own home and your own presence. And then just gently sort of declare your name. So like for me, I'd say, I call back all the energy of Louisa Tanner Munson, cleaned, recalibrated, ready for me to use. I call back all the energy that I've given out to other people. I call back all the care, all the worry. I call back everything, but I'm calling it back to me, and it's clean, it's recalibrated, it's ready for me to use. And you imagine all this energy that is yours, and you've left a little packet over here, a little packet over there, something behind you, and it all comes coming back, I think the sign of Pisces is really easy to kind of bleed out into other people's business, because you're so empathic. You're feeling into everything. It's really hard to kind of rein it in. And so calling everything that is yours back to you. But then there's the next part, which is I release anything in my mind-body system and in my auric field that doesn't belong to me, that belongs to somebody else. And I release it with grace, consciousness, and I don't know, whatever you want to add in. I release it back into the field. I return it to source. I return it to its owner. And so you're kind of clearing everything, bringing all of yourself back and letting go of anything that you've picked up along the way that's not yours. So it's cleansing you at a psychic level. And then some form of blessing, something, talk to yourself, talk to God, talk to the universe, talk to your higher self, whatever works, talk to your body about the energy you would like to experience in a relationship, what it might mean to you. And maybe do something symbolic. You might do it to a candle. You might write something, let it float away in the sea. I don't know. Use your imagination. You've got such a beautiful soul, such a beautiful, sensitive energy. And I think just the act of sort of redefining you versus everyone else with some heartfelt intention. To me, that is a sacred act, and that's bringing you into the moment of self-care, which is really, really important. So I think I'm going to leave that there. But before I go, I just want to say, I always record these forecasts as if I'm talking directly to somebody in a consultation. So sometimes it can feel a little bit too intimate, and that can be a little bit off-putting. But, if this forecast spoke to you in any way, shape or form, come and join the membership, because you're one of us. You'll find Monday to Friday forecasts. They're fortnightly forecasts as well. And, there's even a membership where you can join us in our gatherings. And, we talk about charts and feelings and all sorts of things. It's a really lovely, yummy group that we've got. And if you'd like to explore your chart with me, over Zoom, then just head to the links below. Everything is in the links in the description field, but you can absolutely book a private session with me. So thanks so much for joining me today. Thanks for your time, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Lots of love, Pisces. Bye for now.